Today, we're going to be discussing Project 2025. Now, the first thing you may ask, what does Project 2025 has to do with fathers' rights, family, the African American community? What does it have to do with it? Well, the first thing I want to say is that the Father's Advocate is a podcast and YouTube station, or channel rather, that's designed to teach fathers how to win in court. We educate them about the laws and the landscape and the playing field about the court. And another mission is also to change the negative stereotype of families and Black people and the Black community. That is the mission of the Father's Advocate. We are not a political channel. We are not a political organization, nothing political. But Project 2025, in my opinion, has a lot to do with Black fathers, fatherhood, custody, and our community. So that's the reason why I have chosen to discuss this particular topic. And in particular, I had a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, who I think is a very smart, and he had mentioned he had spoken to a colleague of his that I think he had a lot of respect for. And this particular person told him that he is going to vote for Trump or the Republican Party. And because even the stuff that was outlined in Project 2025, it seems to align with his values. And so that kind of made me think, I'm like, oh my gosh, again, you can choose to vote for whoever you want, but I think it's crucial for people to understand what Project 2025 actually entails. So the first thing, Project 2025 is hands down a conservative playbook. That's the first thing. It is actually, the policies of Project 2025 is not new. It actually has been around. Some of the things that have been happening has actually been around since the Reagan administration, but it is just coming, I guess, to a fold right now. But the purpose of Project 2025 is to actually restrict federal power and give more powers back to the state. And while that may not sound like anything bad on the face, and in theory, it doesn't sound bad. But honestly, if you do a little just history, just a little bit of checking about state power is almost code word for white supremacy. And I hope I'm not violating any rules by saying that. But I'll give you an example. So during the federal court made a case of, the federal court actually ruled in Brown versus Board of Education. If you guys remember, that case actually calls for the desegregation of public schools. That was federal law. That means that it was law for the land. That means every state in the United States were required to adhere to that particular case, meaning that they could no longer mandate there to be segregated schools. Well, despite that case coming down from the federal courts, United States Supreme Court, there were many states, especially here in the South, that said, I'm going to do what I want to do. We're not allowing certain people in our schools. So despite there being federal regulation or federal law that says that you can't discriminate, there were states that actually said we are going to discriminate. So by allowing states to have unbridled power and not having checks, it allows states to essentially do what they want, do what they think that is in the best interest of the state's agenda. And that agenda is not always aligned with what's in the best interest of its citizens. And that's one of the reasons why I think it is important that we understand what is in Project 2025. So there's another aspect, and I'm actually just reading some of my notes. The Supreme Court also just ruled in Grant Pass versus Johnson, giving states the authority to criminalize homelessness. So part of Project 2025, and you guys probably already heard about it, it does affect economics, not only in Black communities, but in other communities as well. However, it is unquestionable that our community would be more likely to be affected by it negatively than any other community. But if that happens and you find yourself in a state of homelessness or there something close to that, this particular case, Grant State versus Johnson, has already said that states, not the federal government, but states have the authority to determine how they want to handle their homeless population. That can include placing these folks in jail. Right now, that includes fines, tickets, and like I said before, incarceration. So we want to be considered, we want to really understand what is the policies of Project 2025 and not just think that there are some things that align with my beliefs. But my position, and I will stand by my position, is that just because a party or policy or someone else's position may align with some of your beliefs, is it wise to go follow them head first when only one or two or maybe three items within their belief system or their policies or their platform align with your belief, but 100,000 other policies do not? In fact, those other 100,000 policies, they actually run afoul your belief and actually can actually harm you, can actually cause you strife and grief and struggle. And that's the thing that I want you guys to understand, is that while on the surface, Project 2025 sounds pretty good, that's in theory, but not necessarily when it comes to the actual policy and how they're implemented. And this is what I want to actually talk about. Okay, so I see Urban Spice says, wow, go and vote. Absolutely. Again, as I said before, the Father's Advocate is not about politics, but I do believe that we should vote. And on that note, I do want to say I've heard a lot of Black men say that they're going to vote the couch. You know, I can't tell you what to do, but I'm just thinking, listen, I understand we have only two viable candidates that we can choose from. But it is my belief, when you decide that you're going to just wait this season out, you're essentially allowing more votes to go for someone else. So let's just say you don't like Trump and you don't like Vice President Harris. And I get it. You know, both of them have their vices. Both of them may not be as likable as you like. But if you choose to wait it out, if you choose to not get involved, if you choose not to participate, then a few things, in my opinion, is going to happen. If there's something that happened in your community, your state, your family, your people, or you have no room to complain. You don't, because you chose to wait it out. So one thing we know about Project 2025 is that it is calling for the elimination of civil servant jobs. And this is something I want to get into, but it's calling for those persons that work for federal government, they are intending to cut 50,000 jobs. That's not a guess, that's not a thought, that is a promise, okay? The president of the Heritage Foundation, which is a very, very conservative organization, who is at the front head of this project, his name is Kevin Roberts. He has already made a promise to eliminate 50,000 civil servant jobs and replace them with conservative loyalists. So this is not a joke. So there are a lot of Black people or African American people that work for the federal government and depend on their income from the federal government. What this project is intended to do is fire your mama, your daddy, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your brother, everybody. So that's why you need to be concerned about this. If you got family members, if you got aunties and friends that work for the federal government, they may be out of a job if they do not align with the conservative belief. Okay. And again, you don't have to believe me. You can go and read it. It's on their website. And that's what I tell everyone. I don't know everything. I'm a lawyer and I can understand a lot of stuff, but I don't know anything. And I always say double check, because I could be wrong. I know I'm not wrong with this, but just double check. But the thing is, 50,000 jobs that are going to be lost. Not only will that affect folks directly, it will also affect your ability to have health. It would affect your ability to have education, your ability to have housing, and it will continue to widen the wealth gap between our community and other communities. So this is why it's important. Okay, so that is one thing. So deciding to just not vote, to me, is, I don't have anything nice to say about it. There is no way anyone can convince me not voting, particularly in this election, makes sense to me. And I don't want to go and talk about how much our ancestors, how they fought to get this right to vote. I don't want to talk about that so much, except that they did, and some of us don't believe that we owe them. I personally think that we do. I really do think that we owe them. But in any event, my position is that we need to move expeditiously in deciding or learning what Project 2025 is about. We really need to do that, because otherwise, um, if we decide not to vote, or we decide to vote our religion, if we're conservative, have conservative values, this may affect folks in our community and us directly. That's just my position. I want to tell a story. I remember several years ago, I can't remember what administration it was, but I had a friend of mine from college, a college friend, who decided she wanted to vote her religious consciousness because she did not believe in same-sex marriages. But there were so many other things that this particular candidate advocated for that actually really harmed our community, like three strike you out. And despite that, um, despite that, she voted for that particular candidate because that candidate said he was against same-sex marriages. So with that being said, I totally understand that there's some things in Project 2025 that does not sound so bad, but overall, it really can have a negative effect on it. Okay. Um, and in addition to that, I will say that the president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, he actually said that this is a new revolution. And I smiled because, boy, we are in some serious time. And he has decided emphatically that this revolution can be bloodless if the left will allow it. So they are willing to implement Project 2025, even if it calls for violence. Okay. And the other thing that you need to understand about Project 2025 is that if Trump gets elected and is placed in office, they intend to implement Project 2025. But if he does not, Project 2025 will be implemented in the next Republican administration or next Republican that gets in the office. So this is not something just for a one-time thing. The other thing that Project 2025 calls for is for shrinking the federal government. I think I might have already said that, and expanding executive power. So one thing that former President Trump has said over and over again, that perhaps we won't have to vote another 4 years, because his intent is to stay in office as long as he wants. And so that, we live in a democracy, and our democracy does not allow for you to a president to actually run more than twice. You're only allowed to have 2 terms. But under Project 2025, and what Trump has actually called for, is that he tends to be that office as long as he wants to. And he's also have said that he only plans to be a dictator on day one, on the first day. We can believe that if we want to, but I don't want to believe something because you just don't know. Another thing that Project 2025 calls for, they actually have 4 pillars. Those pillars are policy agenda, personnel training, and 180-day playbook. And now this is really interesting because this stuff is actually in place now. So under the policy agenda, they said the agenda is intended to reshape the powers of the executive branch. It calls for striking various small government agencies and rolling back funding for abortion and approval of the abortion pill. And I know you guys have heard that. We already have Roe versus Wade that has been rolled back. Many of us believe that would have never, ever would have been overturned. But that is something that they have actually done already, the Supreme Court. And we already see what different states are doing to make sure that not only women not have the right to decide what happens to their body, but they're being criminalized. Part of Project 2025 also calls for some doctors who try to do abortions to be incarcerated. So, I mean, These are things that's related to a woman's health. Sometimes you have to have an abortion or in order to live, but under these policies, women cannot have an abortion even if it's under circumstances where there's incest or rape. And but their position is that if you got pregnant, God meant that child to come to life. Even children that are likely to be born with a lot of disabilities, um, they're still not under this policy. That's not something that you are able to do. In addition to one of the policy agendas, they are planning to implement Schedule F. Schedule F is a classification of federal workers, making it easy to fire federal workers who do not, again, align with the conservative agenda. And it says that under the Trump administration, he actually signed an executive order back in October 2020 to institute Schedule F, but under Biden-Harris administration, they actually overturned that, making it harder. So these are things that we need to be concerned about. The other agenda concerns personnel and then training and the 180-day playbook. Under the Project 2025, it calls for the deletion, and you guys need to hear this, okay? It calls for the deletion of diversity or terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and any piece of legislation that exists. So all the legislation that our ancestors have fought just so that we can have the right to go and use the bathroom or the restroom in public, so that we can have equal education, so that I can be a lawyer and practice in the court, so that I can fight on behalf of fathers or people that have been wrongfully convicted. Those things are going to be returned, overruled. Those language that were created, that was created because of the discrimination that Black people experience in this country. So almost every single thing that our ancestors fought and bled for will be reversed. So again, every term, the terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion will be erased from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and legislation. That is very serious. And of course, that means affirmative action. And I know there are a lot of folks out here that do not agree with affirmative action for some odd reason. There are many successful Black folks that have succeeded in life because of affirmative action, even if they do not want to admit it. And some of them are in the highest office of this land. But affirmative action had its place and it still has its place, even though there is a belief, and I agree with this belief, that that people who benefit mostly from affirmative action are not people that look like me. But this is still serious. Project 2025, it contains the word equity 90 times, and it calls for the elimination of racist equity programs, including offices and staff that engage in that were designed to close racial gaps, and including gaps in healthcare, housing, and business. It accuses the Biden-Harris administration of enshrining affirmative discrimination, specifically discriminating against white people. And this was particularly interesting because there was a case recently with Black farmers. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Just recently, Black farmers were finally able to secure, I think it was $20 billion. It's the largest payout for discrimination when they were not granted financial access to loans and monies and debt relief while their white counterparts were. And so right now, under Project 2025, it will end these type of lawsuits. These Black farmers have actually had a lot of discrimination. They've been fighting for decades, and they finally got some type of payout, but it's been a long struggle. But under this Project 2025, this will end completely. And it will also end, as we already see, college administration admission. And we've already seen a lot of federal court cases now where they've ended affirmative action or admission decisions based on affirmative action. That has already been overturned. It will also prevent the newly expanded minority business development from deploying services to historically Black colleges and universities. So, a lot of you guys that have either attended HBCUs or have children that are intending to go to HBCUs, there's a possibility that there might not be funding for those schools. They also include a plan to eliminate or decrease or curtail a lot of the powers of the Department of Education, including eliminate the Pell Grant. So there are a lot of Black students that actually go to school, go to college on Pell Grants, and this may no longer exist. And in addition to that, for those folks that are still paying back student loans, a lot of time you have the option of paying back student loans in installment plans, or you can do it based on your income. On the Project 2025, they intend to actually stop that and eliminate it completely. So again, this is not something that we need to just roll up and say this doesn't sound too bad, or it does not affect me. It actually will likely affect you and folks that look like you. Um, Also, it will decrease funding to public schools. And this is major because we already have an issue with public schools in a lot of our communities where they're not getting appropriate funding or they're not getting enough of funding. And so the children in those schools don't have the best education. They're not attracting the best teachers. They don't have resources. They have less extracurricular activities. And these kids, because of that, they don't have as many opportunities as kids in more wealthier districts. And so under Project 2025, they intend to decrease funding to public schools, but allow for a block grants to states to issue out to parents who can take those funds and actually go and use them in charter school and private schools. Now, it sounds good on the surface because for I just tell you, my daughter went to not only private schools and charter schools, she also went to boarding school. So my daughter was fortunate, but I had to take care of those expenses myself. But she went to private school, she went to boarding school, and she went to charter school. But there are children and families who cannot afford to send their children there. And that's not fair to those kids. And just ask yourself, are you one of those persons, or is your family one of those families that can't afford to send your child to a private school, but you want your kid to get a good education in your neighborhood? Well, this will not allow you to be able to do that. And again, on the surface, it sounds like nothing bad, but if you look at it across the board, it can be devastating because the mass majority of people are not going to get those grants. And I will go as far as say there will be some Black folks that will be able to get the grants, but a great many of us will not, and our kids will suffer. So this is why, again, this may not be a good idea. Also, there's something called IDEA funding, which is used for children with special needs. Those fundings are likely going to be reduced as well, and they're going to be converted to unregulated block grants. So what that means is that those children that have like IEPs, individual education plans, children that have learning disabilities, there are fundings that's available to them. Well, under Project 2025, those fundings will be diverted to other things. First, it'll be given to states for the states to determine what to do with it. And the states will determine who will be eligible and what those eligibility requirements are. So this is another reason why I think we should be more careful just kind of brushing this through or even considering just sitting out this election. Okay. Now, again, we've all heard about abortion. Abortion is another thing that they're planning to kind of focus on. So with Roe versus Wade, I already mentioned that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, but under this Project 2025, they are also calling for the elimination of reproductive or abortion medication. They're also going to prohibit stem cell research. And for those, when it comes to abortion, for those women that have miscarriages, it's requiring the CDC to collect data on those women for abortions, abortion survivors, and abortion related death, including miscarriages, to determine whether or not they have violated whatever those state policies may be. And again, it is a good idea. We are the United States of America, not United State, United Georgia State or United State of North Carolina. We are not that. And so the ideal of having uniformity across the nation is ideal, which is why the federal government has implemented laws in the first place. But now different states may have different policies and different laws concerning the very same thing, which just makes it dangerous. When I talked to several people about Project 5, most folks did not know much about it. And things they said, well, Project 2025 calls for the elimination of um, same-sex marriages, and so a lot of Black folks, didn't have an issue with that. And I get it. If that's your issue, that's fine. If you are not in favor of same-sex marriages, that's your business. My position, that has nothing to do with me. If that's something you want to do, I am going to respect it. But the interesting thing is that under Project 2025, they're calling for redefining marriages, and they're redefining marriage as the marriage between a man and a female based on their assigned gender at birth. Anything outside that will be illegal. So if you get married, presumably, and you're same sex or intersex, bisexual, non-binary, intersex, or trans, that may be a crime. And I just don't think the government has the right to tell someone who they should love, whether you agree with it or not. But that is what they are calling for under Project 2025. So again, if you have relatives that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, they may be facing criminal charges just for doing something that they believe is natural to them, and loving someone that they want to. And that's your family member. So again, consider this stuff a little bit more serious before you decide, I'm not going to go and vote, or I'm going to sit back and just vote the couch. Um, in addition to that, they're intending to reduce federal government fundings and give fundings to the states concerning environmental rights, civil rights, and labor protection. So they're calling for the elimination or minimizing the authority of EPA, which is the Environmental Protections Agency. And what happens with this, they intend to weaken environmental regulation, which disproportionately affect Black waters. We've heard many cases like that. The federal government has regulations in place that they are supposed to adhere to, even though we do see cases where some of these corporations have not, and many people in those communities have suffered in terms of health and have died. With all that being said, even though they are doing that, there are regulations they have to adhere to. But if this goes into place, they can eliminate EPA, and so those regulations, even though they've been violated at times, those regulations would no longer exist. And so again, those likely affect people in Black communities. So again, I just want you guys to kind of just see what is out there. Another thing which kind of affected me mostly because it concerns the judicial, that's courts. And since I'm a lawyer, I'm in court. So under the Project 2025, it calls for appointing judges that adhere to strict constitutional principles. And some states will have refused to adhere to court's ruling and continue to have segregated schools. There's rolling back same-sex marriages, overturn voters' rights and affirmative actions. So a lot of times what you may see, which some states may do in terms of let's see, like, again, we can look at same-sex marriages. Some states will actually say it's illegal here. There was a time in our nation where you would have to go, I think in Loving, I think there was a case called Loving, I can't remember the full name, where it was illegal to get married if you if it was a white person and a Black person. It was illegal for interracial marriages, but it was legal in another state. And so this particular case, I think Netflix actually did a movie about it, but they actually had to go to another state to get married because it was illegal in their state. And with Project 2025, this is what they're calling for. When that case Loving, I think it might have been Loving versus Virginia. I can't remember what the name is of it, but that case made it illegal for, well, I'll say better, it made it legal for people to marry interracially. But under this Project 2025, it may actually roll that back and say it's not illegal. We can't be sure because a lot of people say, nah, that's not likely to happen. But honestly, we didn't think that they would get rid of Roe versus Wade, right? But they did. In addition to that, like again, like gay marriages, some states may allow for same-sex marriages. However, in some states they may not. So that's why this is important. In addition to that, when you're appointing a lot of these conservative or strict constitutional judges, when it comes to criminal behavior, we know the history, we know the statistics of Black folks versus anybody else going to jail for the same crime. Black people almost disproportionately have more time that are given to them, even if it's a nonviolent crime. They get more time, and I know I work in the system, so I see it. So we have to be careful. So even if you none of this stuff you think maybe the education don't bother you, maybe gay right or doesn't bother you, maybe none of that bother you, but you probably have a family member or a friend or someone that may have gotten involved or have caught up in the criminal justice system. Well, just know if we have more judges that are going to be appointed that have these conservative values, the probability of them being able to get a fair chance, if you will, is even less than it is now. Okay. In addition to that, they're calling for on these conservative or strict constitutional judges, it will be even more difficult to file a lawsuit when there's a discrimination issue or an issue when there's like civil rights cases where an officer has, where a person has been harmed by an officer. That will be a lot difficult as well, depending on which state you may go to. So, as I keep saying, this is not just something really simple that we need to look at and just kind of brush by. We really need to consider everything about Project 2025. And the project, I think, is almost 1,000 pages. So, there's a whole lot more to actually digest. This is just a small overview of it. One last thing I do want to talk about, it does affect economics. So one of the things that they're calling for is cutting taxes, but it's taxing high income earners as well as corporations, and also social programs. So social programs like food stamps, housing benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, stuff like those things they're calling for cutting those. And while a lot of folks may say, well, I'm not on any of these programs, well, it's not just about you, it's about other people in the community. There might be some folks that are elderly people and they don't have a lot of money. Their only income is Social Security and they are getting Medicaid. That's how they have to live. Well, if this goes into place and states have the right to decide who's going to get it, this may actually affect their ability to get, food stamp. There might be people who actually have a need for food stamp because they can't work, they're not healthy, whatever the case may be. But this would probably eliminate their ability to get it. So they might starve to death or have to look for handouts from other people. And just because you actually receive social benefits does not mean you are lazy. It simply means that you are in need of it at this time. So again, on the surface, this stuff looks harmless. It looks like, okay, we're going to be asking people to do better. And I get it. Pull yourself up by your bootstrap. But everybody should have an opportunity. If you are in need, ask for a handout. There's nothing wrong with that. And quite frankly, if we just take a little history lesson, when corporations find themselves at the bottom and trying to struggle, they ask for handouts. But somehow it's okay, right? But when individuals ask for handouts, now they're being lazy. But this can really affect people really, really dramatically and drastically. So these are just a few things that I think that you guys should try to consider. This is not all of it. I would like to go and discuss it a little bit more further on our podcast, but I did want to kind of give that idea, let you guys know what this is about, how it can affect you. And hopefully, really hopefully, for those folks that are thinking about sitting this election out, I hope this may help you decide maybe I need to get in there and try to learn something and not sit it out, because it really does affect. And listen, just because there's some policies or Project 2025 that may be attractive to you, right? Just because there are a few policy, that doesn't mean that the mass majority of it is beneficial to you or that you just sit back. And I can't tell you what to do, but I just don't think it's wise to do that because while again, it may not affect you because you may have yours, but people that you may know may not have it all and they may be affected. Anyway, this is Attorney Hughes, the Bulldog attorney fighting for justice, as well as the Father's Advocate. Before I let you guys go, I will invite you guys on YouTube to check out our YouTube channel. It's the same handle, the Father's Advocate. Please, on YouTube, go ahead and share the videos, like the videos, and become a subscriber. We're also on Instagram. I ask that you follow the same handle, the Father's Advocate. And one other thing, we are doing podcasts. We do the podcast once a week on topics that affect fathers as well as individuals in the Black families. And you can check that out anywhere that you see or hear podcasts, anywhere that you get your podcast from. And the only thing we're doing is that we're also starting to do consultations. What I have learned and have heard and have been asked is that, I say a lot of stuff that helps fathers in court on this channel, but what if fathers want to talk to me? And what if fathers want to, just have a case they need some advice about? They can't find an attorney or they don't know what to do, or maybe they're representing themselves and they want some help. So I am now starting to do consultations. So if you're interested in consultation, you can check us out at thefathersadvocate.com. You can also find the link at our YouTube channel. Anyway, this is Attorney Hughes, the Father's Advocate and the Bulldog attorney fighting for justice. Until the next time I see you, don't stop fighting. Your children do need you.